Hello, everyone listening to the Written Melanin Podcast, the place where you come to get your weekly dose of melanated creativity. I'm your host, CM Lockhart, an author of fantasy books featuring Black girls who aren't all that nice, and the owner of the Melanin Library, an online database of books written by Black authors. And in this space, I invite you to listen to the journeys of Black authors as they navigate all routes of publishing. I'm glad you're here. Today, you guys, I am with Dr. Sabin Prentis Duncan. He is a husband, father, educator, and creator of literary soul food. He holds an executive master's from Georgetown University's McDonald School of Business, doctorate and specialist degrees from Eastern Michigan University, and master's and bachelor degrees from Hampton University. He writes fiction and hip hop essays as Sabin Prentis and nonfiction as Sabin Duncan. And he is on the podcast with us today, and I'm so excited to have him. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. You know what? You said my name's so cool. It's like you had an accent, just Sabon. It sounds so cool, but it's Sabin. So it's
Sabin.
all
I'm so
love.
sorry. I'm so sorry.
But hey,
Sabin.
you own that accent though, man. I feel it. I feel special. So thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. I'm glad to have you on. So, this is our first time meeting as well. So, for our listeners, can you please tell them a little bit about yourself in your own words?
In my own words. Well, I was born by the river. I'm joking. I'm from Detroit, Michigan, and I am the proud beneficiary of the Fred and Joanne Duncan Scholarship for Life. Man, my parents really blessed me and my brother. I have an older brother, Damon Duncan, and I'm really fortunate. My wife, Ramona, my daughter, Sanaa and Ceylon, have really enriched my life. I'm kind of a nerd, right? I read a lot of books. I write a couple of books. I went to school all of these years, but I don't think school is the only way. I just like learning. So, right, I got all of these degrees that I accumulated, but I think one of the more important things about my journey is that I'm hard of hearing, and it's a disability that people can't see, right? So if I was in a wheelchair, people could see it and they could kind of manage how they interact with me, right? But you can't see that I'm hard of hearing and the amount of effort that it takes to tune in. And
Mhm.
so knowing that people can't see that about me, then I know that when I interact with you, I can't see everything that's going on with you. So I
Mhm.
approach you, everybody, students, colleagues, friends, like with this empathy, this open-minded understanding, this type of love. And so then the energy get reciprocated. And then I don't have to keep telling you, what you say? And so it all works out, right? And so this journey, I'm still learning. And I want to thank you for having me.
There's so many things in there. You mentioned writing books, reading books. So we're definitely going to talk about that because, it's the Written in Melanin podcast. But you also mentioned so many things that I just agree with wholeheartedly. So I'm going to try to keep this concise and keep us on topic. But um, you mentioned that you are an educator. So let's touch on that. What has that journey been like for you? Like, how long have you been teaching?
So one of the most remarkable parts is I taught kindergarten,
Oh, wow.
and probably I don't think it's 100 of us in the world. And I say us, I mean I had the great fortune of teaching Antonia in kindergarten, and I taught her in college.
Mm,
Right? So it's like I grew as a man, a human being, as a professional, and it showed up with my kids. And so the kids that I taught in first, second, and kindergarten, and then when I first started teaching in college, the majority of them are like 29 to 35, right?
mhm.
So it's the old school, right? And so when I engage with them now, they complain about adulting. It's kind of funny to hear. Um, it's funny to hear because I know that they have what it takes to succeed, and
Mhm.
I see it as a temporary inconvenience. But when I listen to them talk about it, I'm reminded of that kid that was in my class so many years ago, right? One of the things about earning a PhD is that you realize the more that you learn, how little you know.
Mhm.
And you develop this depth of expertise in one area,
Mhm.
and then you realize how much you don't know in all these other areas. And so, as an educator, I just wanted to, I hate how cliche it has become to make a difference and stuff.
Mhm.
But my parents instilled in me that my brother and I have been blessed. We're fortunate. And so, not as in a debt, but as a sense of service. If we're going to advance in the community as families, we got to give back, right? And so
Mhm.
teaching was a way for me to give back. And then I was under the illusion that I had my summers off, right? And that was an illusion, but nevertheless, And so there are some better curriculum interpreters than I am.
Hmm.
I think the strength of my effectiveness as an educator comes down to the personal relationships.
Yeah. We're getting off topic, so far off topic.
It's
So
really-
I'm going to pull this back around because there are things that I did want to ask you. And one of them was something that I saw on your website. And on it, you say that you intentionally craft stories that focus on overlooked and uncelebrated but important aspects of African American men and their families. And, I feel like that was something that just kind of like hit me when I was going through your website. And I was just wondering, like, what was kind of the moment of no return where you were like, okay, I'm a teacher, I'm an administrator, I have my family. But what was the moment where you were like, I need to write stories and I need to, in particular, feature African American men and their families?
a lot of variables.
Mhm.
I'm gonna be really artsy fartsy, right? And say that, and I'm butchering the paraphrase, right? Toni Morrison, who said, "If there's a book out there that you want to read and it doesn't exist, well, you should write it."
Yep.
And of course, she was right about that. Um, there, I grew up at a time in a particular environment, so this isn't everybody's truth. But I grew up at a time in an environment, and a lot of my peers, a number of them, operated from this perspective that, oh, this girl trying to set me up. She trying to have a baby. She trying to get, whatever, right?
Mhm.
Um, totally glossing over their contribution to that set of circumstances. But,
Mhm.
here we are. And so what happened is I got a group of peers, people I trust, people I love, right? And I think that they missed out on some of the joys of parenthood, perhaps because of their relationship with the mom. More than likely that some of it is their relationship with themselves, right?
Mhm.
I really did truly benefit from having wonderful parents, and I had a uniquely uh, unique connection bond with my dad. And now having the adult perspective of how, as an ordinary human being, I benefited from his input, his his marriage to my mom, how he adapted as a man, and my dad from the old school, right? They come up, don't know broad, tell them nothing, right?
Mhm.
Right. But my mom is smart. So my mom say something, you can see, like, the dynamic of how he dealing with what he used to be,
Mhm.
what he can be when he listened to Joanne and she say this thing, and then they build that thing together, right?
Mhm.
So I could see that happen, and the benefit for my father and the benefit to us. And so, in the sense that, how can I share that? So I live it through my interaction with my kids. I mean, I love them as a parent, but like they really two real cool human beings, right? So
Mhm.
like I called one before the podcast. She walked me through how to set up, what to wear, everything, right? These little girls, they gonna take care of their daddy, right?
Yeah.
But then the other part is how do I share that gift with the world, right? So go back to the Toni Morrison thing, and how do we, if it's a book we want to read, we need to write it. And
Mhm.
then this maybe this is personal. It's a really strong discontent that I have with the images of black men that come across the TV screen in popular media, right? So they're really one dimensional.
Mhm.
Um, and so we got enough dudes caught up in the game. We got enough drug dealers. We got enough philanderers. I mean, those dudes really do exist,
Mhm.
but that's not really even the majority of our story.
Oh, absolutely.
So where does our story show up at, right? And so in this niche, I write these stories that portray black masculinity, black fatherhood. When I say black, I typically mean African American,
Mhm.
in a way that I don't think is popularly seen. Um, People find it refreshing.
Mhm.
It's not utopian. I mean, they have real life issues that they're dealing with and that they're working through. But it's just something about, hey, you got a brother, he love black women, he love his family, and he doing the best he can to make it happen. And when we look at the day to day nuance of what it takes for that to happen, um, it's not easy. It often feels alone, and it brings you face to face, maybe just like with my dad.
I mean, I enjoy hearing it, because the thing is, so much of our lived experience goes into the reasons why we do what we do and create the things that we create. And your lived experience influences that. Like I said, I run this podcast, I'm all about uplifting Black authors, and that's because one of the things that I've noticed is exact same thing that you said. It's just like, we have stories and so many of us are writing it, and we don't really know about them simply because they're I'll say the algorithm gods, right? The people that show you whatever you're looking for on the internet. It's so
It's a real thing.
it's so hard to find. It obviously, things are changing since I initially started this podcast and started doing the Melanin Library and things like that. There's been an uptick, but 2020 happened and we all lived through it as Black Americans. I'm not going to go into it. If you don't know, do your research, happily, respectfully. But now that we're in 2024 going into 2025, it's always like a bump on a line, right? There was an uptick and now there's a downtrend of the support and the love. And I am always a flatline. I'm always like 100% about Black authors. It's never going to change, right? So when you start talking about wanting to see better depictions, different depictions, and not just the stereotyped version of a Black male in media, I fully understand that, because it's part of the reason why I started writing as well, because I was just like, I want to see Black girls who are more than sidekicks. I want to see them have dimension and depth and complexity. And one of the things that I always say, my writing brand, if you will, is I write books about Black girls who aren't all that nice. And for me, that's just saying, like, hey, I'm going to give you a character who is not trying to be somebody else's best friend in order to prove her worth in a story. And because growing up, that is all that I ever saw. And it's just like, no, your anger does not make you an angry Black woman. Sometimes things are just happen and there should be space to express that. And emotions are not bad. It's just the reactions to some of those things that people don't like. And it's just the idea that you can exist and be a full person, and it doesn't have to fit into this nice, neat, tidy little box of what the rest of the world says a Black woman should be in order to be acceptable, right? So the fact that you talk about your family and your lived experience and your friends and the things that you have lived, right? And you're like, there's so much more to this than what they're giving us, so this is what I'm going to put on the page. I think that's meaningful. And I think for anyone who's listening to this who may be questioning, like, does anybody want to read a story that's like X, Y, and Z? The answer is most likely. Most likely, especially if you're trying to show something from your own lived experience, especially if you are a Black author, there's plenty of space. We have nowhere near told all the stories all the ways. So
Yeah.
for sure, lean into it, tell your story. Um, but that being what it is, you have a trilogy out. So can you tell us about the trilogy? I was going to ask you what sparked the idea, but I think you've kind of explained that a little bit. But like, what was your experience writing it? And even like the whole process behind the scenes, because one of the things that I find authors think about a lot is like, oh, I want to write the book, but then you have to sell the book afterwards. So I'd also like to touch on that. But let's start
Yeah.
with telling us about the trilogy.
So in many ways, the trilogy is an arc that represents my growth as a writer.
Mhm,
Um, the first book, Better Left Unsaid, the first book in the trilogy, it was actually the first novel that I wrote.
mhm,
I had a good friend. She tells me that this book needs some more work, and it's too good of a book for you to experience the lumps and bruises that come with the business part of being an independent author with his first book.
mhm,
You should write a different book, a smaller book, to help you learn
mhm,
like the business part of it. Meanwhile, edit, refine, improve this book you got.
mhm,
So the first book in the trilogy, although I wrote it first, it is the second novel that I released.
mhm.
Um, she was right. I'm glad I had enough sense to listen, right? I don't hear that good, but I can listen very well, right?
Yeah.
So, all right, I'm going to take a little step back because in this journey, especially as a creative, as a human being, I owe a debt to my friend, my man, Rand Walker, right? So
Mhm.
Rand is prolific with this thing, right? And he's cranking out novels. So now he writes microfiction.
Mhm.
He's the man with that, right? But as a friend, he encouraged me to write independently publish.
Mhm.
And so we published a collection of short stories. And he did that as a favor for me,
Mhm.
help me get out there, right? I don't know if he gains anything from that, but his love as a brother, he gonna help me get it out there. So then we're walking it through. So Rand likes to say, because I was like, I gotta have my own voice, right? I can't be like everybody out there. Um, and so Rand say, yeah, your voice is your favorite writers got together and had a baby, and that's you, because nobody else like all of these different people at the same time, right?
Right.
So when he did it like that, there's a debt that I owe, or I guess my literary parents, or whatever, right? And so I think Pearl Clegg is like the greatest, right? I ain't
Mhm.
never met her. When I met her, I'm gonna scream like they used to do with Michael Jackson or whatever, right? It's gonna be crying all around, right? So we got Pearl Clegg and my man Daniel Black, right? Daniel is a beautiful human being. Earlier this year, he gave the commencement at Clark, and
Mhm.
Daniel, he turned that thing out, right? So, but his scholarship, his embrace of Black culture, and his my dad, especially in reference to academic stuff, my dad would say, "Hey, take the cookies and put them on the bottom shelf where the babies can get them." Right.
Mhm.
Daniel is a profound academic, profound scholar, and he writes these stories in our everyday voice, vernacular context that make them so relatable that you feel like you're in the story, right?
Mhm.
And now I don't know if Daniel would say this about himself. I see that as an outgrowth of what one of the attributes that made Zora Neale Hurston really good,
Mhm.
right? And so there's a part that want to tell these stories that I can relate to. And then, Pearl Clegg is from Detroit, so that got a little thing right there, right? And so then there's this Akuswa Busia, who was she was Nettie in the original Color Purple movie, right?
Mhm.
She had a book called The Seasons of Bintu Blackbird. And while I love the book, one of the takeaways I had is that we form perceptions of people and we could be wrong.
Mhm.
So that was the guiding premise that led me into Better Left Unsaid, right? So Better Left Unsaid exists in this space where what do you think about a man who's in an affair with a married woman, right? And we got all these opinions about these kind of dudes. And while it could possibly have some shred of truth in it, it's not the whole story.
Mhm.
We'll flesh out this world where it turns into, and I would jokingly say it's a love triangle with four people because that fourth person come in at the end and just kind of
Mhm.
so now that one has it's the most romantic. It has the most love, intimacy scenes. It's the one that I've had the highest visibility with.
Mhm.
So it is my best seller.
Mhm.
Um, but I felt this responsibility that I have this platform, that I have other stories that I'm responsible for telling, right? There's a part of me that while I have a unique voice, Better Left Unsaid is a story that has a unique craft to it.
Mhm.
It might be somebody else who could almost write that same book.
Mhm.
So in the refining of my voice or my sound, I move to compare it to what? The second part of the trilogy.
Mhm.
I keep the same characters and compare it to what focuses on Stokely's mom. So there's a scene in Better Left Unsaid where you go and visit his mom and kind of spend the day with her.
Mhm.
Um, and like I mentioned, both my parents having passed, and what I would give now to go home, sit at the edge of the table, my mom make them chicken and dumplings,
Mhm.
and give me the baby it's gonna be all right speech, right? Because
Mhm.
I know what she gonna say, and I still need to hear the speech, right? And so that's a scene in Better Left Unsaid, and I extrapolate that out. Why is Stokely's mom home? And so I had this unique perspective of as a teacher, as an educator, there are a number of go-getter, bona fide, no nonsense, loving, caring Black women steward that have advanced our communities.
Mhm.
And perhaps too often they're overlooked and perhaps they're only seen as the matriarch, which is Big Mama. Yeah, we love Big Mama, but it's actually more than that, right?
Mhm.
And they have stories that haven't been told or overlooked. So compared to what I think was the hardest book to write in terms of crafting, because as a man, I do not want to appropriate or misrepresent a woman's voice.
Mhm.
But what it is this woman she's a principal,
Mm-hmm.
and at that time there were multiple principals in the city of Detroit that were arrested for mishandling money.
Mm.
Some went to jail. So in the story, she mishandles money, but she don't spend it on herself. Instead of buying computers, she hired another teacher so they can have smaller class size, after school tutorial services, stuff that benefit the kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like we're seeing now in this current election campaign, that we can have skilled, accomplished women, and we society attacks them with these BS nonsense questions. So like how we got this woman running for president, she done been the attorney general. You talking about you don't trust her intelligence. Like that don't even make no sense, right?
That doesn't track.
So, I got Stokely's mom, her name is Elaine Brown. Not Elaine Brown, who led the Black Panther Party after Stokely. I mean after Huey Newton.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So her name is Elaine Robeson, right? Robeson, Paul Robeson, trying to be cultural with this thing, right?
Right.
So Elaine is being critiqued, vilified for her choices for the benefit of the community, and how alone that makes her feel, and that sometimes the people that you can be a blessing to aren't really in a position to help you during your adversity.
No.
As a man writing a story like that, it would just been too cliche to have a man come in and save the day, right?
Right.
So the husband, he love her, he support, but he's really secondary. Like he's in the background. This is her story and how she's tormented by doing what's right for other people, only to be subjected to this.
Mm-hmm.
So now that is the book. I did book signings for that book, right? And
Mm-hmm.
man, I was blessed to do it with a couple of retired principals and teachers. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
they holding the book to their chest. Oh, this me right here. This me. And well, it made me feel that I didn't misrepresent the female leader voice, and
Mm-hmm.
that this is a real story and it's really happening. And so then the trilogy moves to Dance with My Father, right? Because I put dad on the background so that we can tell mom's story independent of being his wife, being a mom. She got her own story and her own feeling. So we
Mm-hmm.
move to dad. Um, I'm sure you've seen it in your life. We all know there are people that we consider the rock, and people rely on them. But who does the rock go to when they need help, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I tried to dispel this notion of black men participating in therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And so while as a husband he was supportive of his wife through her ordeal, she sees something in him that needs support that might be beyond what she can do.
Mm-hmm.
So she goes to therapy with him,
Mm-hmm.
but really it's for him.
Mm-hmm.
In his age, right? Because he got grown kids. I mean, and there's a secondary storyline about a daughter coming home from prison.
Mm-hmm.
So this daughter's coming home from prison. Dad is in this place where, I mean, he's old enough to just be set in his way and just, ride it out. But he's willing to change and adapt and how that can enrich everybody around him. So that was the book that won the award.
Mm-hmm.
Did I get better as a writer? I think so. Yeah, I think they're all good, but I can see my evolution in the craft of how it appears on the page. There's a big vulnerability component, investment, personal story. This experience of, like, yeah, I wrote a dissertation that has academic research that researches schools in Detroit,
Mm-hmm.
but telling Elaine's story as a leader, that's a different story that's supported by all of that nuance and stuff. Um, and so then what it became is that in this journey as a writer, improving my sound, I want to write stories that I'm the only person that can write them, right?
Yep.
And so there's a push to be better creatively and entrepreneurially with each book. And so with Better Left Unsaid, I remember releasing it in paperback.
Mm-hmm.
Then I took it back and made it a hardcover when I made Compared to What a Hardcover because I wanted them to have some type of synergy.
Mm-hmm.
But Better Left Unsaid was first paperback, hardcover, ebook. Then when I did Compared to What, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do hardcover first because sometimes independent writer, if we're trying to control
Mm-hmm.
those profit margins, right? That hardcover, man, that cut into your profit.
Mm-hmm.
So I was attempting to position the company for a type of literary credibility, right? So it don't look like hood fiction.
Mm-hmm.
It's different, but it is a genuinely African American story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it feels different, comes across different. And so then I went back and did an audio book for Better Left Unsaid, did the audio book for Compared to What. So I grew as a business, I grew as a writer. I would dance with my father. I flipped it. I went in the studio and I took my youngest daughter, Ceylon. She did some of the tracks on Dance with My Father. I
Mm-hmm.
narrated it. I mean, and the narrator who did the first two books, she was wonderful. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted somebody who sound black, who sound polished and poised. She delivered more than what I asked for. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Dance with My Father. It needed it needed me to step up, step into the light, step from the background,
Mm-hmm.
and do it. And I did it with my baby because if it's Dance with My Father and it's talks about his relationship and his daughter, what
Mm-hmm.
better than having your daughter on it, right?
Yeah.
But so now we are in the final stages. So while I've done audiobooks, ebooks, we're in the final stages. We have actually shot all of the footage for doing an American Sign Language version of the book.
Oh, I love
So it's
that.
a sign language, and then so it's like different people can experience it. And it's a testimony because I'm hard of hearing and I can't sign. I took a class, I passed it, and then I had nobody to talk to. I forgot, I forgot how to do it. Right, so I got to step that back up. So, as a tribute to another set of my people, we're gonna do the sign language version of the book. And so now I grew as an entrepreneur, I grew as
Mm-hmm.
a writer, I grew as a business. And look, the biggest area. So my dad would say, "Hey, the biggest room in the world is the room for improvement."
Yep.
That's the biggest room for me, improving my marketing. Right. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but that's the biggest room in the world, so I'm gonna improve there. That was a long answer, man.
We are coming up on the end of the podcast, so I'm going to have to limit you on these last couple of questions so we can stay under time. First one is you have your company, The Literary Soul Food, and you offer publishing support services on your website. So I'm going to ask you, what led you to those, and what services do you recommend for indie authors? I'm only going to give you 5 minutes because we got to wrap this up.
Ooh.
I know, I know.
Um, I listen to a lot of books,
Mhm.
um, and there's books published by Gildan Media, and they say it's your professional coach in a box, right? I personally walk you from where you are to where you want to be.
Mhm.
For sometimes that's just editing, formatting.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's like a coaching. Like, so I had a client. She wanted to tell her story. It felt like a memoir. Like, you can't tell that story without talking to your mama.
Mhm.
You get mama in, and it changes the story. Um, then it was so personal they couldn't write it. So then I wrote it,
Mhm.
took their story, wrote it. They approved it. So I got a co-author. So then when she wrote her next book, she didn't really need me as much, right? And so its services changed. And I typically end with my clients, okay, we going through the system of how you are independently published and you in the marketplace, right? It is very personal. I do have a personal rapport. So, like when I work with Carrie Ann and her mother, I was Carrie Ann. They're Caribbean, right? So I'm calling. I'm like, Mom, hey, Mom, right? Um, and so it is a personal coach in a box where I walk you through where you are. I provide the feedback that I think you need, and then get you to where you want to go. It ain't designed for you to have a 10-book contract with me.
Yeah.
You come back to me. I just, hey, you got your dream. You want to write. Okay, when you want it out, and then we backtrack it, and then we kind of tailor it from there. And so sometimes I've had crying sessions, because they've reached the painful part that they gloss over, and I'm like, that is the story.
Mhm.
You're incomplete if you leave that out. Then they start crying, and we on Zoom. I can't offer no Kleenex through the camera, but um, so it's like I guess I become a minor therapist, right? I gotta
Mhm.
console them, coach them, encourage them, walk them through, celebrate, and so it is really. I tend to have one or two clients for a span of months
Yeah.
before I add a new one in. It keeps and so for my business, it keeps me fresh. It exposes me to new ideas, and then the care, the shepherding. I owe a debt to the other artists that they can get their art out right, and to not be in the way of their delivery of their art and their voice to the world. And so I take kind of pride in that too.
I love it. So, that being said, you guys, if you're listening to this, you have two options to get into these coaching services. All right. You got literary soul food and you got written in melanin. All right. So, if you have questions about any of this, truly reach out to somebody. Okay. Ask your questions. We both been teachers. Okay. There is no such thing as a stupid question. Okay. Get the help
Um,
that you need. Raise your hand and be like, I have a question. We got you. We got you.
well, the literary soul food is my tagline.
Hmm.
So my company is Fielding Books, and so
Fielding
that is my
books.
website. And Fielding is a street I grew up in Detroit, right? So it's
Hmm.
home. I got to keep myself anchored in my roots, right? And so, but yeah, the literary soul food, I thought that sounded kind of cool, right?
I
Because
like
these are
it.
about Black people, before Black people, right? The old FUBU thing, right? But it is celebrating our stories, and hey, I can do some referrals, right? Somebody be like, yo, I need this kind of love. I'm like, yo, Reverend Chelsea offers a package. I'll throw you the alley oop, you can slam dunk it, and then we got more published voices.
There we go. There we go. So, and y'all know that there will be links in the show notes or description box, whether you listen to this podcast or watching it on YouTube, so that you will be able to head over to Fielding Books to check out his services or, go to Written in Melanin to check out mine. It'll all be down there. But that being said, if you could let our listeners know where to find you on the interwebs, I will close this out.
So I kind of use social media, right? And I'm at Sabin Prentis on Instagram, Sabin Prentis on Facebook.
Mhm.
The website is fieldingbooks.com. And I'm a professor at Hampton University, right? So if you want to talk
Hey.
academic stuff, right, you can reach out to HU, and we can talk that way.
All right. And shout out to Hampton because, around these parts, we very much support HBCUs. I went to A&T. My brother and my sister-in-law went to Hampton. My brother graduated from Norfolk State, but he went to Hampton. So we support HBCUs around here. Anyway, needed to let y'all know that. Just
Hey, that's a staple in my book. It's an HBCU or two named in every book, right? It's a vital part of the storyline.
that's what it
That's
is.
why we there.
Yeah, we understand each other. We understand each other. All right, but that is it for this episode of the Written in Melanin podcast, you guys. If you'd like to support this podcast, then please share it with someone you think may enjoy it. Join the Patreon at patreon.com/written in melanin. Grab a copy of my books from my website, cmlockhart.com, or donate to the podcast so that we can continue making content. There are links in the show notes for everything, and thank you guys again so much for listening. Until next time, I hope all your books are full of melanin.